My name is Diane Bennekamper. I retired in September as minister at the Congregational Church in Cumberland. For 30 years, I've lived less than half a mile away from the South Freeport Church and am now able to participate here. We are nearing the end of Holy Week with Good Friday on our doorstep. So often on Palm Sunday, I would admonish the congregation not to rush too quickly from the excitement of Palm Sunday and Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem to the joy of Easter morning's resurrection. No need to say those words this year, for our Holy Week, indeed many of the weeks before this week, have been filled with fear and anxiety, with illness and death and despair. While the coronavirus pandemic has not touched most of us too closely, it has set a tone across the land that echoes the words for today from Jesus on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? We might be saying, why have you forsaken us? Our nation, indeed our world, is in the midst of a crisis greater than most of us have ever experienced. We are doers, people who are accustomed to getting into the fray when challenged. And yet in these circumstances, what we are able to do is so limited, which feeds into our feelings of abandonment, another word for forsaken. What might we learn from Jesus' words that apply to our present situation? Well, let's remember the context. Matthew's Gospel tells us that after Pilate handed Jesus over to be crucified, that the soldiers took him out and flogged him, placed a crown of thorns on his head, and crucified him between two bandits, putting a sign above him saying, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." From noon on, darkness came over the whole world until about 3 in the afternoon, when Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," the Aramaic words that translate, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This is the fourth of the 7 last words of Jesus from the cross, and a message which on its surface is hard to take. We don't want to think of Jesus as feeling abandoned by God. If Jesus is abandoned, then what about us? Well, the truth is that sometime during our life, we will feel abandoned by a loved one. We will experience a myriad of feelings that accompany abandonment, maybe disappointment and discouragement, being down in the dumps, intense sadness, or some feelings that are even stronger, like anger or rage. Sometime during our life, we may feel abandoned by God. That happens, especially when tragedies happen to us personally. So what can we learn from Jesus' cry to God? He's certainly not the first person in the Bible to have these feelings. In fact, my God, why have you forsaken me?" is a direct quote from the beginning of David's Psalm 22. King David suffered enormous persecution, and in composing this psalm, he appeals in helplessness to God. The late biblical scholar James Mays helps here, writing, "Having God as my God rests first of all on belonging to a community for whom the center of all reality is the Holy One." Remember, Jesus does not say there is no God, but rather calls on the name of the God he knows. Job is probably the most famous person in Hebrew scriptures known for his suffering. He too felt abandoned by God, deserted by God, forsaken by God, and he shouted his laments and anger toward God. That was part of his humanness, to feel that way. And it is part of our humanness to feel that way too. It's okay to feel like Job. Jesus certainly did. Jesus was the very heart and mind of God in the flesh, and in the moment of deepest darkness, Jesus shouted his feelings to the heavens. Jesus was fully human, and when we have those similar feelings and vent those feelings, that reveals that we are fully human as well. It's okay to feel like Jesus. When you have such feelings that God has abandoned you and you vent those feelings, remember that you are in good company. The company of the psalm-writing King David, of suffering Job, and of Jesus, our Christ. Mays continues, the intensity of the rebuke is directly proportional to the depth of the faith from which it springs. Only those who have great confidence in God can be disappointed when God feels aloof. Although the words question God, that challenge is raised within the context of faith. My God, why? We too may cling to God and shout our feelings to the highest heavens. Finally, remember that these are not Jesus' last words. David wrote the 22nd Psalm, my God, why have you forsaken me? But he also wrote the next Psalm, number 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Psalm 22 was not his last word. Job complained to God when he lost all of his possessions, his family, everything. He railed against God in anger, but those were not his last words. Also found later in his book are these words, I know that my Redeemer lives. Job's feelings of abandonment were not his last words. So also with Jesus. My God, why have you forsaken me? These are not his last words, not his final words, not the end of the story. So stay tuned. There is a quotation said to have been found in a World War II Polish ghetto. I believe in the sun when it is not shining. I believe in the stars when I cannot see them. And I believe in God when I cannot hear him. May it be so for you. Amen.